Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Right, we're all sorted. So, if any of our lovely protesters, if any one of them would like to come and have a chat, I have a spare microphone, I have a seat for them, and we'd like to give everyone an audience to have their hearing. I thought we had agreed that we would have a conversation. Did we not agree to have a conversation? Did we not agree to have a conversation? Would you like to tell me why? Yeah. That it's not turned on at the moment, I'm sorry. But would you like to come and talk? No. Well, what happened to the brave people who talked to me when I didn't have a microphone? Why are they suddenly so reticent to talk? I'd really like to speak to someone from over there. Hello, sir. Yeah. Come in. Well, no. Hang on. We're going to have a discussion. No, we're going to have a discussion. This is the terms I'm setting, and if you don't want to accept them, that's okay. Okay, well then, carry on. Right, is there anyone who wishes to have a discussion about the issues? Anyone at all holding a sign? I would love to talk to you about the things that you believe. Like, for example, no to racism, very good. No to fascism, very good. I'm looking for a fascist, and I actually can't see one. So, if you'd like to come and talk to me about what fascism is, I'd love to have a chat. Is there a single person here who knows what they're talking about? Can any of you define fascism since it's on your signs? Yes. We'll do the regular chats afterwards. I want to get them out of the way so they get out of our hair. Yeah. I'm sorry? Right, okay. Well, who's that? Hello.
I've got to shoot off. I missed you at Western.
Oh.
I'm a bit of a fan.
Oh, don't worry.
No. I 3D printed that for you.
Oh, dude, that's amazing.
But don't touch it because the paint is rubbish.
Right, okay.
It comes off on your fingers.
Right, okay.
But I just want to come and show my support.
Oh, dude, thank you so much.
Throw it away if you want to.
No, I'm not going to throw it away. I'll put it on my. I will, Matt. I'll put it on my. I've got a library bookshelf that I put all the things that people give me on there, so I'll put it on there, man. Thank you very much. Cheers. Right, okay, well, I mean, it seems that our protest is fairly peaceful, so I guess I'll go over and see if I can talk to one of them. Hello, right, okay, so is there any reason that none of you have got the fortitude to come and talk to me about the things you were talking to me about a second ago? Any particular reason? Well, we can talk about anything. What's that exactly?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Zionist conspiracies?
I have no idea what you're talking about. But please do.
Okay. Would you like to talk about anything? Yeah, sure. I mean, it's not my specialist subject, but we can have a chat. Yeah, come on. Sorry, mate, wait for the mate. Sorry, chap. Right, if you'd like to sit in that chair, that'd be great. Yeah, and if we can give them a round of applause for coming and having dialogue, that'd be wonderful. Would your supporters like to come in a bit closer? We don't bite. We're very nice. We're very polite chaps. Yeah. People are going to want to see face. That's all right. Right. Okay. So with this, if you keep it like that, about there, so you're talking into the microphone, that'd be great. Okay. And I'm just going to get the UKIP manifesto up because I've got it memorized. So I can tell you exactly what UKIP actually have in their manifesto about the NHS, because, like I said, it's not my specialist subject. It's, God, it's a bit nippy today, isn't it? Right. So, what's your name, sir?
Joshua.
Joshua. Nice to meet you, Joshua. Sorry, you can get the sign up in a second. Thank you for coming out. I really appreciate it. Right, so you'd like to talk about the NHS?
Yeah, I just heard earlier that you said something that the NHS will collapse because of immigration.
Yeah, that's Milton Friedman's opinion. He thinks that social services or mass immigration can exist, but one will destroy the other.
Do you think that the NHS will be destroyed by immigration, though? Is that your opinion?
Yeah, I think that if we allow 300,000 net people to come in a year, it's just going to increase the burden on the taxpayer, and I don't think that'll. I don't think it's sustainable.
Okay. Well, I just want to talk from a personal point of view, if that's all right. But I've been employed by the NHS on and off since 2007.
Yep.
And my father works for NHS. My sister is a nurse on a ward of an NHS, and I could tell you that the immigration is held up. Sorry, the NHS is held up because of immigration. I mean, I myself have been treated by doctors from Africa, Europe. We've got doctors in there that come from Asia, surgeons, really, really good surgeons I've worked with that have looked after children, looked after the elderly, the vulnerable. We need those immigrants to withstand the pressures that the NHS is under due to austerity. I don't think it's got much to do with immigration.
I think it's actually a combination of both. I mean, I think that the reason the NHS requires so much extra money and every funding cycle is because of mass immigration. And I think that if we had less people using the NHS, it wouldn't require all that more money. On the subject of immigration, particularly professional and doctors, do you not think those doctors might have been needed in their home countries?
Yes, but because of the economic situation of those countries, they are not able to train. And
well, hang on, that's not true. I mean,
well,
they trained as doctors in their home countries, didn't they?
You'd have to ask them. You have to ask them on a one-to-one basis, I guess.
Well, if we're allowing if we're opening the borders to say Indian doctors or African doctors, then the proviso is they're a doctor before they come here.
I'd imagine so, yes.
Yeah.
But they can give better training when they're over here. And
Sure.
what they are doing over here is they are helping our children, our communities, and they are fixing them, looking after them, and taking really good care of them.
Yes, they are. But do you not think that there are people in India and Africa who need their doctors?
Yes, but then you have doctors from here that go over to their countries.
Well, no, I don't think that's true. I mean, how many doctors from here go over there if we have a shortage of doctors in this country?
I don't know the specifics, but I'm only talking from a personal point of view and what I've seen in the NHS.
But this is the point, isn't it? And I think there's a problem when you allow skilled migration over from other countries. I think it's a way of keeping those countries in poverty.
Well, you could, like I say, you could argue that they are in poverty due to capitalism and exploitation. I
don't agree that's the case. Capitalism is making these countries wealthier.
Really?
Yes. Steven Pinker wrote a book called Enlightenment Now, and he just lists all the facts and figures. There's no question of it. If you look at, what metric would you like to choose? The HDI, child mortality rates, age of life, average income per year. You can look at any metric, and the world is getting better because of capitalism.
It depends how the wealth is distributed.
You can laugh, but it's all true. Have you ever heard of Steven Pinker, madam? Like, have you? Yes, no question of it. No question of it. No, that's actually getting better as well because of capitalism. Is China a capitalist country? No, it's not. It's a communist country. China is not a capitalist country, and they're responsible for the majority of it.
They have a capitalist economy, I believe.
No, they don't. They actually have industrial zones that allow foreign investment. But if you want to talk about pollution, then you have to talk about China, since they're the major polluter. It's surely.
And the United States.
No, it's actually China and India. For example, most of the plastic waste that's in the Pacific comes from 2 rivers in Asia. In the West, we're actually surprisingly good about this, and it's something that we that is called dematerialization.
Is that something like pollution due to consumerist capitalism, though?
Sorry, say again.
Is that pollution not linked to capitalism, though? Consumerist capitalism.
Well, I think any industrial activity.
Exploitation of the working class.
Well, it's any industrial activity. It's industrial activity creates waste products, and if you have in the developing world, they are a lot less concerned with high-minded ideals of environmentalism.
With throwaway capitalism creates pollution because you're not building sustainable jobs.
Well, it depends what it is, doesn't it? I mean, I'm totally against deregulating things like environmental regulations and stuff like that. I think that'd be terrible. I mean, I'm actually on the ban plastic bags and ban plastic straws bandwagon myself. I mean, they're going anyway because people are making sensible choices, which is fantastic. And so if that's something that's happening and there are demonstrable harm from them entering the environment, I do think we should just get rid of them. I don't think we should just be paying 5p to have the plastic bag. I'd rather paper or some alternative like hemp or something.
But why shouldn't doctors who want to work over here and who are helping our NHS, why shouldn't they be allowed to do so?
Because they are needed in their home countries. I mean, if you think about like a doctor who's like trained and raised in India, that's not Western resources that train that doctor. It's Indian resources that train that doctor. And then we say, well, okay, instead of getting paid however many rupees a month, we'll pay you double that in pounds. And so we're effectively, it's like a new form of colonialism where we're pinching those. But not only that, it actually pulls up the ladder to our own working classes, because instead of offering incentives and aid to help our, British, the native Brits become doctors and improve their station, we're essentially undercutting them by saying, no, we'll just take some foreigner in. And it's a very selfish way of looking at the world, in my opinion.
Well, I can only speak from a personal point of view, and when I've worked with those doctors, they told me that the reasons they come over here and train over here and help our NHS and look after our communities and our people is because they can get a level of expertise and education, and many of them do go back to their own countries, but they need the experience, they need the education, and whilst they're here, they're doing fantastic jobs.
Well, I agree that they're doing a fantastic job, and maybe we should have some kind of secondment system in regards to that, so we can, like say, if there's expertise that they need that they can take back, then we can say come over for a 5-year period or whatever on a whatever kind of work visa, and then they return as normal. I mean, I think that's all great, but I'm really concerned about the lack of faith in our own country and the fact that people are essentially saying we can't train our own doctors, and I really think we can, and I think we should.
I mean, we can train our own doctors, but the problem is that due to austerity and cuts, I mean, it is austerity that is killing the NHS.
Sure,
and austerity is a political choice.
It's not just austerity. That's the thing.
Well, it's the major driving.
Well, I agree. I mean, I'm not a Tory. I hate the Tories. So, I really don't like the way the Tories are managing the country.
But the point of the NHS is it's the greatest achievement of socialism in this country. Surely. It's the best showcase of socialism.
I'm not a socialist. So.
I am a socialist, and I'm a socialist because of the NHS. The NHS made me a socialist.
Okay, but
Working as a nurse for 9 years made me, or working as a nursing assistant for 9 years made me a socialist.
Okay, but I'm an entrepreneur, and that made me a liberal. How far down the line of socialism do you go then? I mean, do you think we should collectivise property?
I think we should have social democracy in this country.
I think we do.
I don't think we do.
Why not?
We have institutions where it works on the NHS, but I think they are being deliberately propagated against in order to try and make them fail.
Well, I agree with that, and I actually completely agree with that. And one of the things that I really do despise about the Conservatives is the fact they do all of this under the table.
So you already do it on top of the table, so to speak.
Well, no, I would want to keep the NHS, and in fact, one of my opposition, the reason for my opposition for mass immigration, is because it will inevitably damage the NHS. Now, I'm not saying that we should have no immigration, obviously, and I'm not against skilled immigration. I actually think that, like you say, if they come over and then get the experience that they need, help us out, and then return to help their own countries out, I think that's a fantastic idea, and I think that we can actually get some kind of regular scheme going about that. That's actually something that I could really get behind.
Well, all I can say is that I believe that socialism is the NHS is the greatest achievement of socialism in this country, and we should be proud that we have doctors who come from all over the world to work for us, and they look after our kids, look after our elderly, and without them, the NHS would be on its knees.
Well, sure, but if we had less mass immigration, the NHS wouldn't be struggling so much. But not only that, I do think they have an obligation to help the people in their own countries as well. I really do.
And many of them do.
I know. I'm not saying that none of them do.
They gain the skills. they help our communities, our people,
Yeah.
and they go back to their own countries.
Well, that's
but if they want to
fantastic.
stay here, then they're entitled to do so. If they've worked in our NHS, they pay their taxes, and they look after our elderly, our vulnerable, our children, our sick and our needy, then I don't have any problem staying here indefinitely.
I agree. Service guarantees citizenship. I agree.
I think this is the point where we agree to
Oh.
disagree and say thank you
What
and
do we
goodbye.
disagree about? I think you made some great points. Hi there. What's your name? Sir?
My name's James Newell.
Nice to meet you, James.
Hi. Yeah, I'm 18, college.
What would you like to talk about?
Don't know how to put it across, but
You've got to hold it so it's pointing at your mouth.
don't know how to put it across.
Yeah.
I feel like I've been indoctrinated. But let me put it to you.
Yeah, tell me about your situation.
So, about 14, you get a sense of the real world, and I came across to watch your channel. I've been watching it for very few years now. But the whole so I've been looking at this side of politics for a very long time, but I haven't really been looking at the other side, and partly my responsibility. And then one day in our mandatory lesson that we had to take in college is we would learn about neo-Nazi groups, actual neo-Nazi groups.
You're right. Yeah.
And there was a video that they played that was a promotion video for it, and it was about the refugees and stuff. And then at the end of
played
it,
a promotion video for neo-Nazis.
they shown us to it.
Right, okay.
I think it was like a German group. I'm not sure.
Was this in school or something? Was it?
College? Yeah,
In
it's
college, right? Yeah.
Mandatory.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And at the end, I said, "What's wrong with that?"
Probably not the best thing to say at the end of that.
And the reply was I can't remember specific, but it was pretty much "Got you, boy." And then from then on, I've been like, "Oh shit." Oh, sorry.
Probably best not swear. But yeah.
Oopsie doopsie. I may have made a mistake and then ever since I've been thinking, have I been indoctrinated? But my question is, where's the line between information and indoctrination? Specifically, from what I'm looking at, I've been looking at the other side stuff, but not as much. But because I listen to your channel a lot, obviously it's full on your views and you keep using first lately. You keep
A
using
little bit closer.
Sorry, it's very cold.
Well, the way so the way I describe it is I think it's the way you take in the information, and social media is going to be responsible for essentially radicalizing every single group that exists on social media. I'm very much a proponent of watching all kinds of media.
Okay.
You've got to. I mean, I've got an array of different channels that I watch myself, and I make sure that they cover the entire political spectrum as much as possible. Okay. And every single person should do that too, because one of the problems, and Silicon Valley is well aware of this, and in fact, the one of the co-founders of Facebook said that they deliberately took advantage of the sort of natural human desire to see things that already confirm your existing beliefs, to essentially drive people into social media channels where they only ever see things that already confirm a certain belief and deny other beliefs. And you really have to manually break out of that.
Yeah, but
that's going to cause radicalization.
I feel like because of the mainstream is to the opposite position side, that I see a lot of it rather than trying to delve into it. But being a part of both sides of the groups online, I feel like I see enough. But it's obviously with the media, I'm sorry.
Right.
It's
don't worry about
it.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to put it. It's the information that I get, I feel like is very one-sided, even though I see both sides. And I feel like, where can I get information rather than being influenced, indoctrinated? Because I was talking earlier to someone over there, and being respectful, and they were being actually very nice to me. But it was the language of, asking me questions, but like rhetorical, so like trying to agree with their stuff, and it's so where
a certain kind of framing that traps you into a channel of itself that you have to go down. Honestly, I'm not sure there's a good answer. I'm not sure that there is any one place you can go to get reliably neutral information. It certainly isn't the BBC, despite the fact that's how they present themselves.
Well, my question wasn't really where to get neutral information. It was just where, information indoctrination, and it's just how do I not delve down the hole? Because I've made sure I've not delved down the hole of far right and all that stuff. I know the limit. But
well, the way it basically works is like a cult, and cults focus around worship of a leader, denunciation of the outsiders, reaffirmation of the insiders, and an unwillingness to have dialogue with those outside of the cult. And that is effectively what social media is creating, is a series of political cults.
Yeah, the more people that get banned, the more one-sided they are getting favourable.
Exactly. And honestly, the only thing that I think you can do is make sure you listen charitably to the other side of any argument. You know, that's honestly, that's the only solution I can think of. And the answer to that really has to come from us. I don't think we can rely on Silicon Valley for this. I think they're, in fact, directly incentivized to make us turn into these things and to essentially radicalize us. And I think the only way, I mean, like, for example, none of these people knew what I believed. You know, they were totally half-informed because they've been in their little social media cults, and now they're just backpatting instead of coming over and having a dialogue. They they don't want to do it because they know I'm going to present another side to the story that they haven't even heard.
Yeah, but like earlier, a guy was taking a picture of me and a few other people, and I went up to him and said, "Oh, where can I go and see this?" "Oh, no." And then, but there were other people there that were willing to speak to me and not influence me, but to see their side and that. But it's just online and just trying to. Try not getting indoctrinated, and obviously, you don't have a great answer, and I just wanted to ask a question.
No. I appreciate the fact that you did, because it is a really difficult subject, and the burden of responsibility has to be on you, and it's up to you not to just fall into the habit of only watching things you like.
Yes, and
you've got to get out of your comfort zone.
I feel like I've gone into, but it's
It's a strange world, because I mean, a lot of the people now, I mean, if you, like chaps, these sort of age chaps. Sorry to point you out in the crowd. These guys didn't have social media when they were growing up, so this is well, no, I didn't either. I didn't get on the internet until I was 16 years old, and that was on dial-up. So social media is a brand new thing, and we don't actually know.
It's different for me because since I was 14,
you've grown up with it.
I've been on it, and I've been on, and that's how I've been influenced.
Yes.
And this is my first ever time meeting someone in person about. This is the first time first time I've ever met someone in person about politics. So it's a very different realm from just seeing it online, and
what can we do? This is the thing. We're all learning about this together, and I think that the one thing that is the most important thing is just don't pathologize the people that oppose you. Don't tell them what they think. Ask them what they think. Because that's the thing. Like you got a lot of people out there who wanted to tell me, and I'm sorry, you've got to hear out the other side. You've got to. Otherwise, you get into the habit of saying, well, everyone who opposes me is evil, and I am where the good resides. Everything else is terrible.
Yeah.
And that's the mindset that does create dangerous extremists. So I wish I had a more concrete answer, but just watch some Jordan Peterson is basically what I'm saying.
No, he's pretty good at talking.
Yeah, he is, yeah.
But, sorry, it's been a bit of a wavy, like...
That's all right.
It's cold, but
no, I know.
Yeah, but no, thanks for that. It's just something that is worrying me.
You got to keep it close. But
it's something that's worrying me, that I am being indoctrinated by just watching one person's views, and it's just like how could it? Yeah.
No. You're absolutely on the right track here, because it's being cognizant of what's happening to you that is the first step to realizing perhaps you're in a bubble that you need to get out of.
Yes.
But thank you very much.
I was in a bubble, but no, thanks for that. Thanks so much. That's all right.
Right, should we try and get some of the little protesters? Oh, have they all gone home? Oh, hang on a sec. Folks, you're not going home, are you? Folks, you're not going home, are you? Why are you going home? We're going to be here talking about the issues. Would you not like to talk about issues with us? Are there no issues that bother you? No? Right, okay. All right, well, thanks for coming out. It's been nice seeing everyone. Would you like to have a conversation, sir? Okay. No, thank you for being peaceful. I appreciate it. I appreciate that you're in denial. Okay. All right. Cheers. Well, I'm sorry. He's the elected official of Weymouth who gets to decide what you think. Well, just like many Remainers, you probably didn't vote for him. Right, okay, so we've run out of people who are here to complain about us, but at least these ones were peaceful. Oh. What have I done that's annoyed you? So I'll sit on that one if that's all right.
Oh, right.
Yes.
I've been deplatformed.
Hello,
Aha, right.
Mr. Benjamin.
Right, well, it's good to see you again.
Yeah. I've
Oh,
come
it
to
was until now I'm
confront
getting-
you this time
Get in trouble.
on the appalling way that you are normalising troublesome dialogue.
Ooh, that's true.
It
I
is.
am normalising troublesome dialogue.
And it is spreading.
Really?
It is,
I hope
it is
so.
spreading the evil rhetorical techniques you use of logic, reason, and evidence
I'm
are
so
spreading.
sorry. I'll try and stop that if that's
But
make,
it
if,
is-
if that's hurting some feelings.
It is grossly irresponsible of you. I saw yesterday a grown woman brought to a state of emotional trauma as Victoria Derbyshire attempted to use logic against you. And it was like watching a child playing with a loaded gun.
Oh, it wasn't that bad. No one got hurt.
I felt really sorry for them. A lot of people did get hurt. I looked on the Twitter feed afterwards, and it was 99% appalled, traumatised, and there were questions of why is this man not locked up already?
Well, if they get their way, I will be. So there is that. But I think that what I wanted to say in the interview with Victoria that I didn't get to do because it was a bit hardball, I suppose I'd describe it as.
I wouldn't say hardball. It was as sympathetic as any Maoist show trial.
That's such a great way of describing it. But no, I actually quite enjoyed the interview. But I found it very interesting when she said, you're normalizing these horrible things, and it's like, well, they are normal. They happen to regular people every day. There are tragedies that will happen to every single person. There's no getting away from it, and there's no point trying to pretend that it won't. And the easiest way to deal with it is to make it not scary. And one of the quickest ways to make something not scary is to mock it. That's the purpose of humor, and that's the reason that totalitarian regimes go after comedians first. They go after free speech first. Because if you can take the power away from them and make something not sacred by laughing at it, then it suddenly loses its grip over you. It loses the mental hold that it has over you. And I really do believe this, I with a sincere conviction, that we have to be able to talk about uncomfortable things. And, of course, that makes some people protest because they don't like that.
I think what you're misunderstanding is the depth and breadth of the feeling opposed to your way of view. And there's an excellent example from history for how you should take it. Are you familiar with Alan Turing?
I am, yes.
So Alan Turing was of a disposition that was felt to be incompatible with the morality of his times. Mm-hmm. And he took an action which removed that cause of stress from society. And I brought you an apple with me today.
Did he not commit suicide?
That's right.
Yes,
he removed the problem.
That's.
And given that you are such a tiny minority, as judged by Twitter,
should I also follow his example?
Well, wouldn't it be the fair and decent thing to do to spare the world suffering?
But this is the thing, and well, but this I like the way you've framed this. It's very, very genteel. This is exactly what they want to have us do. Is just say, look, we'll pretend the problems don't exist.
We don't have to pretend. They know the problem exists, and the problem is gobby bastards like you, who I think I should say are suffering from moral Tourette's. You cannot resist speaking the truth. And that's bloody offensive.
Where do I go with that? Honestly,
it's very simple where you go with that. Branch Davidian Trust, and there have been plenty of examples of mass cult suicides. All you have to do is arrange for your followers to get together and remove the distress of our existence from the life of normies.
Well, I agree, but the problem is that the problems themselves are going to keep creating people like us, because we are all an example of
modern genetic counselling can fix that.
Well, I imagine eventually they will make it so we're effectively in what was it, Fahrenheit 451, was it? Brave New World. Sorry, yeah, Brave New World.
Bokanovsky is on its way.
Yes, so we won't have that problem. But at the moment, we are all a consequence of the failures of the system. To fail to actually address through dialogue and reasonable compromise the problems that we actually do face. And instead of talking to us, because I'm sure that you're all fine people, I'm sure that you're not hateful people, I'm sure that you are not people who want to do damage to the world. But things are being done that have to be discussed, and calling people racists or fascists is not the answer. It just isn't. And I'm sorry that I'm not giving you a more eloquent response to your wonderful framing here, because it really was. I mean, you must have worked on this. but I do believe that it is a moral wrong to try and shut down these debates and shut down these conversations. I think we have an obligation, a duty to have the tough conversations. And it's really to the embarrassment of the media that I can turn up and like 30 people, 40 people turn up on a cold Friday afternoon in Weymouth to talk about literally the problems we can't discuss in public on the media. And I realize that a lot of this is offensive or something like that. Even then, I don't actually find anything that we're talking about particularly offensive. But it is their failing that we have to come together like this to do this. They have a responsibility to represent your issues in the public dialogue, and they can't just refuse on the grounds that they find you to be morally impure. Not everyone had an Eton education. Not everyone is ready for the dinner party atmosphere of Westminster. Politics is grimy and grubby and should be done in the streets like this. They're sat in their ivory towers where they're not they never have to suffer the consequences of their own policies. They are very well insulated. They've got guards, they've got money, they've got very, very lavish surroundings. It's not their problem. And you can see that the absolute...
To be fair, they do have to suffer the problem as well. But Anna Subi can get people that call her a Nazi locked up.
I was about to go on to James Goddard. How long did he spend in jail?
I think it was only a month.
It was only a month, right? Okay, well there we go.
But to be fair, they weren't as sympathetic as the leftists really want to be. They want you to take. I read a travel book that was written just for you.
Oh really?
Yeah, by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. It's an archipelago where you would really fit in. And it's
I can't believe I'm not already there.
Their Trustpilot reviews are exemplary. Very, very few people ever came back and spoke out against it.
No complaints. But James Goddard is the great example of this, actually. As soon as the sort of working class decided, right, they were going to get involved because people like Anna Soubry were actively trying to undermine the result of the referendum, and still they're trying to just reverse this. When he goes down and starts calling her a Nazi and saying, well, I have a problem with what you're doing, oh my God, the plebs are revolting. This has got to be stopped. So a month in jail, and he was banned from going inside the M25. He can't even go to Parliament now. He can't go and protest. He has been denied his democratic rights because a politician didn't like the way he was protesting her. Well, I'm sorry, he didn't do anything illegal. He just yelled that she was a Nazi. My goodness, I bet everyone here got a penny for every time they'd been called a Nazi because they want to have a conversation that the establishment don't particularly want to have. We'd all be very wealthy people, but it happens one time to one Remain MP, and that's it. Jail and banned. It's unacceptable. It's totally unacceptable.
He'll have to go to Kekistan.
He absolutely will. Hopefully we don't get sent to the gulags instead. Thank you, man. Cheers. Right, would anyone... Yeah, please, sir, come up. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Carl.
What's
My
your name,
name's Simon.
Sorry?
My name is Simon. I've
Simon,
been a
nice
fan
to meet you,
of
Simon.
your YouTube channel for some time now.
Oh, thank you.
My question relates mostly to what's been discussed recently in the last couple of interviews. What do you think we should do about the media in this country and the way that it operates?
Well, my personal strategy is take them on in their own dens and beat them on their own terms, hopefully. And I think I've been doing a fairly good job of that so far. So that I think that explains the smear campaign. But for the regular person who doesn't have the kind of training that I've had, it's a really scary prospect. Because when they find someone that they don't like, they will do everything they can to destroy them. And it's about preserving a certain kind of moral order, like the dinner party atmosphere of Westminster. I mean, you should always be suspicious when you see a media article about someone you've never heard of, but you can tell that the way that it's framed is designed to make you angry and make you think, oh, that's a bad person. You don't know anything about that person. Like, the people over there thought I was arguing on the opposite side of debates that I had previously. because the media had misled them into believing this. I mean, that's pretty incredible, isn't it? Like, the actual things that they think about me are the 100% opposite of what is actually real. And so you should be very cautious whenever you see, and for literally any figure from any political persuasion, from any walk of life, when you suddenly see a flurry of articles saying this is a bad person, ask yourself why. You know, why is this being presented to you? You didn't know who this person was, you know, but suddenly, oh, you're meant to hate this person. Oh, come on. You know, that's two-dimensional. Nobody is just a hate figure. You know, nobody is like that. And I genuinely feel bad for, like, I didn't realize how bad it got either. You know, like, you talk about, say, Tommy Robinson. Man, watch his Oxford Union speech. And he's not under attack. He's just there, just saying, look, this has happened to me, that has happened to me, the other has happened to me. And then you realize that the media campaign against him has been, it's just evil. It's absolutely evil to do that to someone. You know, people like Tommy Robinson are not created in a vacuum. They do not spring from the ether, fully formed. You know, they are the consequence of a process of events that are not being taken seriously. And we know they're not being taken seriously because in 2014, Dr. Alexis J produced her grooming gang, her report on the Rotherham grooming gangs. And she found that the labour establishment of Rotherham had been completely complicit in what had happened through fear of being called racist. Now, in the last 2 months, 40 people in Rotherham, 38 men and 2 women, have been arrested for their part in grooming gangs, going up to 2015. So a year after her report came out, this was still going on. This is something that has to be addressed. This is just... There is no way that we can just allow this to go on and just say, well, anyone who criticizes it is racist. It's obviously not about racism. It's obviously about harm being done and political correctness being used as a tyrannical tool to keep dissenters quiet. So...
Okay, part of the manifesto says that the BBC licence fee should be scrapped. Do you think that a public service platform, not a broadcaster, might be able to mount a challenge to something like YouTube, Twitter, as well as the BBC?
It probably could. I mean, in my opinion, the BBC is trading on a reputation it no longer deserves. It used to be that it was supposed to be a neutral forum. You know, it was supposed to be a neutral platform to raise issues that the country would be concerned about. And it was founded on good principles, very much in the same way that all of our institutions are founded, with the idea of political neutrality being core, the central tenet of the institution. But as we can see with the Brexit vote, frankly, a study recently found that 90% of the BBC's coverage was pro-Remain. It's not a politically neutral platform.
I see. Also, a bit of a wider issue. A lot of this political correctness comes from the victimhood culture.
Yes.
Do you think that culture would exist without the victimhood industry?
No, it is. And you're right to point out that it's an industry. It absolutely is. I mean, people like Victoria Derbyshire are cheerleaders for this industry and profit from it. You know, she literally parades out victims to be publicly adored, and then shames people who say, "Well, look, there's another way of handling victimhood." You know, and it really does come down to essentially there are two moral frameworks that are colliding here: the framework of guilt and the framework of shame. Now, the reason that these people are all so angry about a joke I made however many years ago is because I'm refusing to let them shame me for it. Because I believe in a certain time and a place, you know, in the atmosphere of a comedy club or something like that, you can tell blue jokes, and it's ridiculous that they would come out and suggest that they've never laughed at an off-colour joke. Do I think that they've never been down the pub with their mates and told jokes like this? No, of course I don't. I know they have. Do I think they've never watched like a Ricky Gervais Netflix special? Of course they have. You know, it's just that when they're in public and they think that, oh, everyone's watching, they have to perform. They have to say, no, look at me, I'm perfect. Look at my public face. It's beautiful, it's flawless, I have the right politics. Well, I don't agree that that's how things should work, because I think that people like that don't feel guilty when they do something. I think that people like that will do something if they think they can get away with it, because for them, the moral standard is other people's opinions. Now, I come from a completely different moral tradition. It's actually the Christian tradition that is what Britain was founded on, or not founded, but kind of evolved into, which is the moral standards of guilt. If I do something wrong, I am responsible for that. I feel bad about that, and I will take the actions to rectify my behavior. I will go and apologize voluntarily to people that I think I may have wronged. Now, I don't think that telling a joke in a different atmosphere, in a safe space for jokes, is something shameful. I don't think there's something wrong. I don't think I've hurt anyone by that. So I'm not going to apologise because I don't feel guilty about that. If anyone should feel guilty about it, it should be the media that is decontextualising these jokes and shoving them in everyone's faces. I'm not a daytime TV entertainer. I'm a late night entertainer, if you have to put it in the terms of like television. But I genuinely come from a different moral framework where I believe actions speak louder than words. Whereas you can see from the opposition, they think the complete opposite. They think, one of them turned up saying, I want you to get milkshaked on a sign or something. Well, to me, that's assault. It's not a very severe form of assault, but no one should be touching me. I've come down for political dialogue. No one should be touching me. But she's concerned about something I said and not concerned about the violence that will be done to me, whereas I'm the other way around. I'm not very concerned about what people say. I'm concerned about the physical actions that they take. And that's the moral schism that's effectively tearing apart this country. And I think very few of them really understand this, and this is why they get so angry when I just refuse to accept their shaming tactics. I don't care about their opinions on what's right and wrong. I know what I think is right and wrong. This is how my father raised me and his father before him, and they were good, moral, responsible men, and I think that kind of mindset creates good, moral, and responsible people. And I think that it creates strong people who can take words, who can take the rough and tumble of political life. And I think that the kind of shaming culture that we're going into is going to be the complete reverse of that, and is going to create tyranny. For the fear of having hurt feelings, they are going to silence everyone. There is nothing that they won't end up doing. And I really think is a genuinely disturbing precedent.
From your answer, I would say that you agree that we need to set up an alternative to the Silicon Valley giants, an alt tech, if you will. But how would you go about doing that?
It's honestly not a small job that you're proposing, and I don't think I can give you a good proposal for it here, because the thing that is required is entrepreneurship. It's going to require the government to be aware that it would be good to have alternatives, and for these alternatives to be given a certain degree of freedom. For example, the European Union is actually going to stifle this with the copyright directive.
Article 11 and 13.
Exactly. This is actually going to make the barrier to entry to creating a social media platform very high, and so most people simply won't be able to do it. It's not a small question that you're asking. I don't think I can answer it satisfactorily like here, but it's the sort of thing I could make a video on at some point.
Oh, I hope to see it. One last question.
Yeah.
Would you mind signing my hat for me?
Not at all.
Thank you.
I'll grab a pen in a sec.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Have you got a pen?
I don't have a pen on me.
Anyone got a pen?
Yeah, go on in the van.
You got sorry, I think this lady's got one actually.
What point, dude?
Yeah.
Oh, someone's got a Sharpie. Inbound.
I watch you on YouTube, so I can't believe you're actually here.
Thanks for coming down, mate.
Okay.
Ah, great.
I've got a bugger off, but I watch you on YouTube.
Yeah. I'll upload the whole thing. There you go, mate.
Jokes and graffiti.
Thanks for coming down, dude.
I was keep the pen on the table.
Well, yeah, I probably should. Right. Would you like to talk?
Yes, please.
Please sit down.
This is switch on?
Not yet.
All right.
Right. Okay. So it's on now, and if you keep that pointing to your
Right
mouth,
here.
right there. That's perfect.
Excellent.
Right. What's your name, sir?
I'm Andrew.
Nice to meet you, Andrew.
And pleased to meet you, Carl.
What's on your mind?
Well, I'm going to be a bit all over the place, I'm afraid.
That's all right.
I wanted to talk about a few things, such as the UKIP joining policy, where we have a list of prescribed organisations that we say if you're a member of those, you're not in. They all have one thing in common. All of them are fringe right.
Yes.
Which unfortunately means that if we're trying to keep the extremists out, we're leaving a door open to the fringe left because we don't have momentum on there, for instance,
That's
or
true.
Antifa.
That's true.
So if we're trying to keep the extremist bigotry out of the party, we're not looking in the other direction.
Well, I mean, I think the reason for that would be that Momentum and Antifa are kind of naturally opposed to UKIP, because UKIP is a country that thinks this is it's a party that thinks the country should exist. And Momentum and Antifa are generally, frankly, they're communists.
Yes.
So they actually don't think the country should exist at all. So they're just naturally not inclined to join a party like UKIP. So I guess it's just never been necessary.
Okay, so it
But
goes
I-
without saying.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, I wouldn't want Antifa or Momentum joining either. I mean, these people are dangerous.
No, I wouldn't be fans of that either. I'd expect them to start causing lots of trouble.
Well, yes, exactly. Like they do in the Labour Party, incidentally. Yeah.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, I'm going to be all over the place. The other,
Just a little bit closer.
well, bit closer.
Yeah,
I was
that's
trying
great.
not to swallow it.
Thank you.
I was thinking about the monarchy.
Oh, yes.
It's very key to our identity.
Agreed.
We've had a monarchy for centuries, possibly even thousands of years. Can we say thousands?
1,000 years, yeah. Yeah, we can actually.
Yeah.
I learned this not so long ago, but Queen Elizabeth II is actually a descendant of both William the Conqueror and Harold Godwinson, the two sides who were fighting at the Battle of Hastings. So I think we can say about 1,000 years.
So
is
we
fine.
finally achieved unity after all.
Yes, it only
Yes.
took 1,000 years, but we did it.
Yeah, and it makes me a bit nervous to ask this question. Should we continue to have a monarchy and an aristocracy, or should we become a republic?
Republics are usually formed out of revolutionary fervour. So when the previous order has collapsed
Yes.
and found itself with an active and violent revolution against it, that's usually when a republic is formed. Personally, I do not want that to happen. I think that
No, absolutely right.
Yeah, in Britain we've got a very different tradition because we're a very patient people. Frankly, we don't like revolutions. We're not used to them. We haven't had a revolution in like 400 years, 350 years, something like that. We do things by increment, evolutionary. We change and adapt as we go along, and this is why we are in a position where we've got a constitutional monarchy and a House of Lords and an aristocracy, but they're not dominating public life. It's the Parliament that does.
Yeah.
So I'm very opposed to any of these kind of revolutionary changes in Britain because I don't think the context is right. I mean, if we're a different country, then maybe we could absolutely argue that.
The reason I think about that sometimes is because I look at the royal family and it looks like they're in a goldfish bowl. They're on display to everyone all the time, and they don't get a choice. They can't be voted in or voted out.
Yeah.
They're born into it. So
It looks like
I
a
do
prison.
feel sorry for them sometimes. Yes, they have enormous privilege and they're well looked after, well guarded. It's a gilded cage, very ornate, but it's still a cage as such.
Oh no, I totally agree with you. I do not envy them one bit.
I'm glad I'm not one of them.
Yeah, me too. Right? It looks like a prison to me. Like
yeah,
a
it
gilded
does.
cage is a
That's
great
what
way
it
of
looks
putting
like
it.
to me.
You're not free to do what you want. You have to do what your minders and all of the other people around you are telling you to do. So, I mean, I don't see why they can't just abdicate. If they didn't like it, they could say, well, I don't want that.
Some have done so.
Absolutely.
And I bring that up, particularly the prison part, because I look at Her Majesty, the Queen, Elizabeth II, and I wonder if she's not so much in charge anymore or master of her own views, but being pushed around by her advisors.
I think it's the current government in Westminster effectively sets the policy on that regard. I think because you see it with the Queen reading out the prepared statements from the governments themselves. I think she is a ceremonial figurehead.
Yeah, I think that's what's happened.
Yeah, but I mean that's probably a good thing. That's effectively it means we're a monarchy in name only. We're effectively a republic, which is probably a good thing overall. But yeah, she's definitely not a politically important figure in that regard, I would say.
Okay, so perhaps over the span of time, like centuries to come, which I won't get to see, perhaps the monarchy will gradually fade out.
Maybe. I'm actually quite happy with the position the monarchy has as kind of a symbol of the history of the country, and a connecting thread that goes back 1,000 years that is a core part of British identity, and I wouldn't want to remove it because of that. Even if philosophically, I think a republic is a better idea.
Yeah. Okay.
Anything else?
Well, maybe I'll come back later. I think some of the others brought up some of the subjects, and you've talked about it. So it's
Okay.
I'm happy to stop there for a bit. If anyone else wants to go,
right? Okay. Yeah. If lady there, thank you very much. Thank you. Cheers, dude. Hello. All right. What's your name, please? Sam. Lovely to meet you, Sam.
Very nice to meet you.
Right. So if you can keep
Yeah,
this
it's
about.
all right,
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand them.
Got to give everyone a crash course.
Yeah, so I have a couple of questions. The first question I'm asking on behalf of my daughter who's at uni. She's also autistic, so crowds she struggles with.
Sure.
And she wants to know, obviously there's a massive left-wing bias
Yes.
in universities, and she's much more conservative. She finds it very difficult to interact. She finds that she's under pressure from lecturers to not be open about her opinions.
Yeah.
And she also is concerned about what happens afterwards, because the particular industry that she's looking at is also massively left-wing.
Which industry is it?
Entertainment.
Oh.
She's an actress.
Right, yeah.
And she's worried that she's going to be barred from things like writing plays or interacting in theatre because she doesn't follow that line. Do you think there's anything we can do to change that? I'm not to infiltrate, but to change that bias in some way.
Right. So to work within these spaces is very dicey for anyone who doesn't follow the sort of far left narrative on these things. She's absolutely correct. They do have a massive left wing bias. Because of who I am and what I do, I tend to meet a lot of people who are dissidents in these spaces but can't admit it.
Yes.
So I can't name any names, but there is in the sort of London circuit, in the theatre productions, in the comedy productions, and various other sort of these sort of entertainment industries. There is a minority, but I think probably a growing one, who are starting to find one another and starting to essentially form like a kind of resistance to the politically correct order. But they are people who are established, and they're very sensible about keeping their heads down. You know, don't do what I do, basically, because you know that'll be the end of her career. You know, that'll be the end of her career. So what she has to do is essentially use social media very sensibly. She can't post jokes or anything like that. She can only post things that are very middle of the road and not challenging any kind of moral order. She has to accept the rule of political correctness in her job. So she can't question certain things. She can't make jokes about certain things, and that's just not something that's going to be within her power to change. And if she's lucky, she'll be able to write the plays that she wants to write, even though there is going to be undoubtedly a great deal of pressure if something was misogynist or racist by the standards of the far left. She probably wouldn't be able to get that through without being at least clever about what she's actually trying to say. I'm sure she's not a racist or misogynist, but then most of the people these people accuse of being any of these things aren't anyway, so what difference does it make?
Exactly.
It's about how you define them. So if she wants to put I guess what we call just conservative ideals into her plays, good luck. I really wish her the best, but they're very on the ball about catching this sort of thing. And so, I mean, I guess I don't want to be too negative, but it is something that is a genuine risk. And obviously you're aware of that because it's just a fact. But my advice to any students and anyone going into these kind of industries is always just keep your head down and do the work, and just don't try and rock the boat. Just try and put the message out that you believe in, and hopefully it'll find an audience.
Okay, fantastic. The second question is for myself, and it's a slightly uncomfortable one.
Okay.
Do you think that successive parliaments and our monarchy are traitors? Because we never should have been put into the EU in the first place, because we have a Bill of Rights which has never been repealed, which states that the power in this country cannot be handed to a foreign power.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what has happened with the EU.
I think I wouldn't say traitors. I think that's a little
Seditious?
Let me explain. So back when we went into the European Union, it wasn't obviously trying to become a sovereign entity. It looked like it was a common trade policy that was just going to be trade amongst European nations. And if it was just that, I can see why people would agree to that. That sounds like a good idea. But obviously 40 years down the line, we've seen the trappings of statehood mount and mount and mount. And we've seen the overriding of democracy in, dozens of countries now where they've just been forced to vote until they get it right. And now we've come to the point where the EU is just a common tax policy and central banking and army away from being an actual supranational state. And so now I think you could it would not be inaccurate to describe the Remain Parliament as being generally seditious to the constitution of this country. There should be no higher lawmaking body than Parliament itself. That's in our constitution. That's what sovereignty is. And so when you have these Remain MPs saying, well, no, we want to stay because Parliament is sovereign, I mean, it's a statement that doesn't make any sense on the face of it. It's like, we want Parliament to be sovereign so we can give that sovereignty away. And one of the people I always quote on this is Tony Benn, who was saying, well, no, look, the sovereignty resides in the people, and they infuse Parliament with that as representatives.
And the monarchy.
Of course, and the monarchy. But Parliament really, I think, is the way that they look at it. As representatives of the people. And we know that at this point, Parliament is not representing the people. So if they actually took their duty seriously, they would resign. If you're an MP who couldn't deliver Brexit, you'd resign. I'd resign. If they were saying, right, we're gonna sign away our sovereignty to Nazi Germany or something, I'd say, well, look, if I can't persuade you, I'm not going to be part of this, and I'd leave on a moral conviction and flee to America probably. But for some reason, our Remain Parliament simply will not do what they are tasked with doing, and I don't even know if it's ever happened before where the Parliament has been. I mean, not since the English Civil War anyway, where Parliament is just openly in defiance of a clear mandate from the people. And we're in murky constitutional territory. No one really knows what to do. But luckily now, I read in the Times day before yesterday, 80% of businesses are now ready for no deal. Mm-hmm. So the economic damage to the country will be minimal. The European Union no longer wants to discuss Brexit with us. They're so sick of us, they don't want to have it. You've got Macron, who actually wants to kick us out at this point, and then you've got on the other side of the coin, something like 58% of people in France don't think the European Union is going to last another 20 years, and I agree with them. I don't think it is either. Mm-hmm. But and so I think that really the time is right for us to just leave. The blockage, the log jam in the river, is Parliament itself, and I think it's because the MPs there, frankly, know that things will change come the next general election.
Well, they'll have to take responsibility and actually govern the country instead of leaving it in someone else's hands.
Well, that's a great point, isn't it? Because they say, Parliament's sovereign. It's like, well, why don't you act like it? You don't think like you're sovereign. You think like you want to make other people sovereign over us. So why do you keep standing on this point of principle that you clearly don't hold?
Considering that you don't want anything to do with politics and you don't want to be a politician, I want to thank you for standing up for what you believe.
Thank you. I really appreciate that because, my God...
I bought you a present.
Oh, thank you. Politics is just the most grimy game. The people involved, right? And I tell you what, it really is London as well, right? And it's not just London; it's the Westminster area. Everyone in there, honestly, they're vipers. They are really. I mean, they get up to all sorts of stuff that are obviously illegal. They say all sorts of things that you would be, it'd blow my hair back when I hear it, and I can't wait to get out of this.
Well, I'll try not to get you in trouble, but I thought we could start a wall.
Luckily, it's made of foam, so thank you so much. Thank you for coming down. Would anyone else like to come and talk to me? I'm happy to just sit here and talk about anything if no one wants to actually ask me any questions, because I've got an awful lot that's on my mind. As my poor stewards are aware of at this point. They must be sick of hearing me. Hello, sir. What's your name?
Hi, I'm Alex.
Nice to meet you, Alex.
So I've got two questions.
Yes.
The first one is, do you think we should keep a uncodified constitution, or should we codify it, like in the United States, have freedom of speech codified so it can't be infringed with the certain political correctness that has seeped into our society?
This is actually a really it's a really good and complex question, and one that I've actually struggled with a lot, because Dankula wants a codified constitution, and it's very hard to resist that line of logic, because it's like, well, why wouldn't you? It's your protection, they're your rights, and it would become a solid legal ground like in the United States. So it's one of those things where it's like, it's a very tempting thing to say yes to. But on the flip side of that, we've got in this country what's called a historic constitution. It's a series of acts and precedents that have... Oh, God. I hope everything's okay. Just wait for them to go past. There's not anyone here that's in trouble, is it? All right, okay. But yeah, so we've got a historic constitution in this country. So it's a series of acts and precedents and decisions that have been made that have been inherited from the past, and the way that these are interpreted is always, I don't know how else to describe it, like with an eye to being reasonable, right? And now this, I think, is obviously not something that's set in stone. So it changes from era to era about what is a reasonable thing. But it also, I think, helps shape our national character, because I think the British generally are a very reasonable group. I mean, like, for that group who were opposing us, they were very reasonable. You know, whether I don't agree with them. I think they're misinformed, but they weren't, just screeching and all that sort of thing. They were actually prepared, at least in part, to have a dialogue, and so I think that it's a kind of. I think it's important for our national character that we don't get too litigious when it comes to this, because the Americans are exceptionally litigious. And the thing is, when you've got very hard and fast rules that don't necessarily need a huge amount of interpretation, then it means that fairness isn't so very important anymore. The law becomes the barrier, whereas instead it's more to the eye of fairness that we operate law and justice in this country. And I really like that, and I think that that's important to preserve. But I would like some addition to the historic constitution that would that would emphasize free speech, because I really do think that it's genuinely under attack in this country.
Yeah, I completely agree. If anything was to be codified, it would be freedom of speech for me. That would be the main one. And my second question is, with hopefully a no deal coming soon, hopefully, what can we do as an economy to diversify it, and what would you suggest that we do? Because we're so invested in the service industry and R&D that unless you have a very high IQ and you go to university and everything, you're going to struggle. You're going to be stuck in retail for your life, and you can't live that way.
I totally
Towns
agree.
like this are dying.
Yeah. Well, incidentally, it's nice to be able to quote the UKIP manifesto. They're very interested in bringing back grammar schools and apprenticeships. So young men working with their hands, for example. And grammar schools are a very good way of increasing social mobility for working class families, to get them out of the poverty trap that it's easy to get trapped into. I mean, I'm sure all of you folks know better than I do, but I mean, when I left university, I found myself, I didn't leave with a degree. I hated the degree I was doing. And so I found myself working in just dog's body jobs. Anyone could have done them, and it gave me quite a lot of perspective on the difficulty that one experiences when you're on a very low wage and you're wondering how you're going to pay your rent, how you're going to get your next meal. These become far more important than how do I self-actualize, how do I pull my get up the ladder. And so anything that the government can do in that regard to try and help that and improve that is definitely necessary. And that's what UKIP want to do. They want to bring back grammar schools and apprenticeships, because I do think that it's prestigious, or it used to be prestigious to go to university, but I agree that not everyone is designed that way. I mean, a lot of people learn with their hands a lot more easily than studying a book, And the thing is, I'm one of those people who is fine with studying, that suits me, but I understand that doesn't suit a lot of people, and that creates a barrier to people who are otherwise intelligent, hardworking, diligent, but it creates a barrier just because it's not the style of learning that they like and they respond well to. And honestly, I think these people are disproportionately young men. And I think this is a symptom of how young men are being failed by the system. It's being because women tend to be better at academic work, more patient, more interested in doing the reading, whereas young men tend to be more action-oriented and goal-oriented. And I think that the education system should reflect those natural tendencies. And I don't think there should be a segregated environment, obviously, because there are obviously some women who prefer that way and some men who prefer that way. Like I prefer the academic environment myself. But I think that the options should be there. I don't think we should be creating just like a one-size-fits-all system at all.
I agree. I don't think it works. What about technical colleges and universities? Do you think we should support those more as an alternative to universities? And
absolutely. Like I said, I'm no expert, but I think there is always going to be a fairly sizable portion of the population that prefers to work with their hands, and I do think that should be encouraged. I really do.
Thank you. Honestly.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to talk? Yeah, come over, man. Guys, is it usually this cold in Weymouth?
No.
It's freezing today, isn't it?
Well, that's why I'm quite happy to be fat at the moment.
Yeah, me too, right? But my hands are not as fat as they should be. What's your name, sir?
Leon Ty.
Right, you've got to hold this about that far away from your mouth.
First of all, for when my brother watches this later, hello. And I'm probably going to meander a little bit because this is a thought I've been having for a couple of years now while watching your stuff and seeing what Trump's been doing as well. Do you think there's going to be a rise on, I suppose you could call them, social media politicians?
Yes.
Where, for example, you've said yourself many times that you are... Words.
Take your time, man. There's no hurry. You just have to be a little bit closer.
Ah.
Sorry.
I'm trying to think of the right word here. I had it and then I lost it.
I do think there is going to be a rise of social media politicians.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. You hold yourself accountable to your viewers, and well, that's more of a direct form of democracy, really, because you're going to be able to.
So it's
see
got to be a bit closer.
Yeah, you're going to be able to see how people are reacting to your decisions in real time.
Yeah.
And how does it feel to be among the first generation of new politicians?
I hope that the things that happen to me will be a lesson for people who come after me. If you think you will ever go into politics, you'll have to be a lot more careful about the way that you do things. I mean, I never thought I was going to go into politics, so I told all the jokes I wanted.
I'm a bit of a shit poster as well, so I know I'm not.
Yeah. But yeah, anyone who comes after me doing this kind of thing, I mean, obviously the context in which they find themselves, like 20 or 30 years down the line, however far it is, who knows what it's going to, what the atmosphere of the country is going to be looking like then? Because at the moment, I think that we've effectively got a sort of a kind of generational divide. So people above 40 tend to use social media a lot less and rely on traditional media outlets, but people under 40 are very much turning to the internet, and that's far more decentralized, and it's much more of a wild west of politics when it comes to that. And that's not a hard and fast rule, obviously, but it's a general trend. Which is why, for example, UKIP is actually the second most popular party among 18 to 25-year-olds in the country. Other than the Labour Party's on 33%, and we're on 14% with this demographic. And I think that's very interesting how we've engaged with social media and embraced this sort of new way of doing politics. And it actually is showing results. But I think we're probably a bit ahead of the curve. I think in the next sort of general election or after that, we'll see more of an effect in this regard. I think we're probably a bit ahead of the curve. But yeah, just be ready for the powers that be. Because if you're the thing that social media has done is it allowed someone like myself to get a large channel outside of the influence of the established order, and there is a kind of a ladder that you join a network of people, and then you work your way up this network of people based on how skillful you are at whatever it is you're doing. And if you don't join this club, then you're in trouble, and they'll treat you as an outsider. For example, I'm actually going to a hustings later today in Bristol, which is why I have to leave at 4 on the dot. All of the other candidates have decided to pull out of this debate, so it will just be me and a room full of people to talk to. Now, that's exactly how I want it, to be honest. And I'd like to thank the other candidates for pulling out, so I can just say whatever I like, to the people listening. But this is the for me, when I heard that all pulled out, I was like, right, okay, this is the clear defining thing. I didn't go to their clubs, I didn't agree to their rules, and I decided to do this myself in my way, and that shows. There's this very clear dividing line, and anyone else who grows outside of the political establishment that wants to then try and enter it, you'll find just everything is either blocked against you or actively hostile and coming at you. So be ready for it. Be ready. That's definitely going to happen to other people. And if you believe in what you're doing, I mean, also, honestly, a lot like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez over in America. She's a lot more integrated to the political system over there, but once she got office, she really started taking off as an outsider in much the same way I'm doing now, and just repudiating their moral standards and replacing them with those of her own. That's going to happen a lot. So you're going to have a lot of moral conviction of what you're doing. But I think I've gone on enough there.
To be fair, at least you don't have the crazy eyes.
Well, yeah, right. Yeah, I'm just a fat neckbeard. Thank you very much, man. Right, is there anyone else? Yeah, come on over, man. Hey, what's your name, please?
Cameron.
Nice to meet you, Cameron.
Nice to meet you.
How's it going?
I just want to ask, what do you think of Nigel Farage and his Brexit pie?
Well, I mean, I still like Nigel Farage. I mean, I remember when he was calling Islam a fifth column in the country. So, you know, I'm rather sad to see him bend the knee to political correctness. But he's always been part of the sort of Westminster Club, and I think that's what he's doing now. The Brexit Party really is a bit of a stunt, in my opinion. It's not a party. You can't join it. It doesn't have a manifesto. And I don't see how they could ever write a manifesto that will satisfy Claire Fox, George Galloway, Nigel Farage, and Anne Widdecombe. These people are just politically incompatible. And so this appears to be a big stunt to try and raise their profiles, get them seats, which obviously pay, and obviously Farage is an MEP, so he needs that seat, or else he's, what is he, And I think that really it's a way of attacking the Conservative Party, because I think this is all essentially a way of encircling the Conservative Party and then eating them away, because it's not really doing that much damage to Labour. It's doing nothing to Labour. They've done whatever they can to UKIP and they can't do any more. So it's essentially a way of changing the old guard in the Conservative Party. I think it's a stunt, and I think it's going to dissipate very quickly when Brexit actually happens, assuming it ever does. But UKIP will still be here after that. I mean, we've just passed 30,000 members, which is the second highest they've ever been, I think. So it's, we're going to keep going. We've got multiple issues that we want to talk about. It's not just Brexit. When Brexit's over, UKIP will still have a full slate of issues that we want to discuss.
Okay. So what do you think of his chances? No.
Well, his chances are probably quite good. I mean, he's got all of the sort of establishment Conservatives on his side now, because the obvious weakness of the Conservative Party has essentially led them to need somewhere else to go, and that's the only place. I mean, Nigel Farage was a member of the Tory party all those years ago. He's never stopped being a bit of a Thatcherite, and, I'm not judging him on that. I agree with a lot of the things he believes. But it's very clearly a safety valve for the Tory party, And anyone who's concerned about the sort of on-the-ground politics where, like, the regular person is actually being affected by certain issues, I don't think they're going to challenge any of those things.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's the only question. Yeah.
Oh, thanks very much, man. Cheers.
Thank you.
Right, I might take 5 seconds to find a toilet. So, Simon, do you want to come and get me in trouble with the media? Right. Well, I'll find a. Is there like a cafe around that I can? Oh yeah. Right, where am I looking? Sorry.
I'm now going to sing for you. Right, hands up who's voting Labour. Good. Oh, God. Hands up who thinks communism's rubbish. We're doing all right here, aren't we? No, you didn't put your hands up. Good. Socialism? Who approves of socialism? Stick your hand up. Good, lovely. We're doing... Huh? Yeah, I was just learning about Yugoslavia before it all went Pete Tong over there. They had a version of sort of communism stroke capitalism. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? They're trying to do away with the family and the community. So do you think this is all cultural Marxism, trying to do away with our family? Yeah. That's why they're turning pubs into McDonald's, which is a crime. But yeah, they did that in Germany. Have you tried their beer? Yeah. Well, McDonald's German beer is very good, but yeah. But going back to Yugoslavia, they got on, and you had Christians living alongside Muslims, and then the capitalists came along and decided they want to ruin it all, and then basically they went in there and off your war went. But we don't do conspiracies here, do we, Carl? So I won't be talking any more about that. Who wants to come and tell us about something? Glyn? Is he in there, is he? Go on, him. Small businesses, definitely. I think Silicon Valley is the biggest cancerous blot on social media, but there again, social media, I don't know. We've been controlled by social media for ages, and it's a good political tool. Yeah, I mean, if you look at Facebook, that is probably the worst out of all of them. You can't say anything. Mark Zuckerberg, what a nutter. And I mean, it's election rigging and everything, isn't it? I mean, they've actually got evidence of that. But yeah, it needs to be regulated. But there again, how much regulation do you have? Yeah. Well, lobbyists and stuff. Yeah. I don't like lobbying. But there again, I don't want politicians to earn anywhere near the amount of money they do, because it gets greedy, but greedy people. It's not easy, you know. But it does. It gets the greedy so-and-sos going for a job like that. If they had a lower wage, right, I don't think it would appeal to the people who are corrupt. And, yeah, I think you need to be able to look at people's incomes. And also, yeah, so definitely. I shitpost. I don't usually talk sensible, by the way. Any other questions that'll catch me? Oh, God, yes. Hello, lover. How are you? Yeah.
It's predicted that somewhere in the next upcoming decades, after the 2020s, that there will be a huge, massive migration from the African subcontinent.
What, under the Barcelona Declaration, the Marrakesh, and all the rest of it?
Over time, probably, but it's predicted that as the population of Africa increases to reaches 1 billion, I think in 20 years it will reach higher than the population of China. There'll be keeping Africa, basically nutrition for charity.
Yeah.
There's a prediction that it will migrate.
Well, you're going to pile over anywhere that gives you a better life, aren't you? You know, benefit system.
So my question is there a long-term strategy from UKIP or any other party that will be hopefully relevant in the next upcoming future decades?
Right. I can't speak for UKIP, as you obviously know. I'm not even standing for them. But any government that gets in needs to think about an Australian points scoring system at least. Do we actually need you? That's the thing. Because if we don't need you and you're coming here, what are you offering?
Yeah, exactly.
So, but no, we need to fix them in their countries, not here. Because the problem's not here, it's there.
No, yeah. But the thing is that there's a argument that giving like Western charity and giving all those programs is actually keeping the African population still desperately poverty, because that increases the population.
Why don't get him to sit down and get a mic? Want to get him to sit down with you and get a mic?
Yeah, come over here.
Yeah, why not? Move to the side a bit.
Cool.
Now we really are in trouble. This man knows his stuff.
All right, does it work? Oh, yeah. Okay. It's there's an argument out there that if you increase the African, charity and Western funding, it increases the African populations that it's being designated to. And even though, despite there are claims that the money's going to corrupt African governments and corrupt
warlords,
dictators, warlords as well. If there are like more mouths to feed, you're not only going to see the disappearance of African wilderness and African great wildlife that Western natural conservationists want to preserve, but you're also going to create more and more people more poverty, and therefore they're going to look outwards. And what's the closest continent they're going to go up to other than the Middle East? It's going to be Europe. And if once that happens, then you'll see a major demographic change in the upcoming decades to come. Now, usually, like I'm myself, I'm 22, so I can picture myself in the 2040s and 2030s almost being in sort of like my mid 40s up to my early 50s. So I'm just saying, like, hopefully this party will still exist in this time, and therefore there will be, if we ever get into, you know, British government power, how are we going to basically, you know, prevent us being swamped by this upcoming, you know, African horde?
Assuming that we get out of the EU, because until we do that, we can't do anything.
Oh, yeah.
And then assuming you get people like UKIP coming down with some serious policies, which is like, we can't let everybody in.
Yeah.
Because that's just impossible. There's only so much room here, right?
Yeah.
When you've got not enough houses and not enough jobs, because it's great for the globalists, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you flood the place. There's like, say, for instance, two people to one job.
Yeah.
People will work for less, because if you don't, he will. So that's not good. But we can't, I mean, Africa, I hate to say this, isn't our problem.
Yes, exactly, yeah. And I go with the proposition that we shouldn't give any form of charity to Africa. I think we should allow the African nations to just develop, and whatever problems they're having, it should be dealt with them, because I kind of see Africa as kind of like a dumping ground of the world. It's where all the other countries have just come in and just felt, well, the people here are not very, you know, very bright, and they're still tribalistic. They're going through their tribal spear days, whilst everyone else is civilized and all of that. So, but they've got some good resources, and they've got some good areas. So let's exploit them and all of that. And what it's done is that it's created a whole entire populace that everybody is terrified. Like, it's even considered that I think in South Africa, there's a culture where they rape babies because it believes it cures AIDS for some reason.
I'm not sure, but there are some mental cases.
Yeah,
you know.
And name one other culture in the world that actually does that. I don't think you can. But
as I say, over there, I mean, there's another country now going in there to try and get the mineral resources out of them.
Oh, yeah, China. Yeah.
But we have to, when we've got nobody sleeping in doorways like you got here and begging on the streets, and when you've got soldiers being fixed and everything else, and when we've got enough housing, and when the old people are fine, because, you know, we've got one of the lowest pensions in the EU.
Yeah.
When all that lot's sorted and we've got some money in the bank, then we can start looking elsewhere to help other countries. But at the moment, we're skint, aren't we?
Oh, yeah.
So we pay way too much tax, and where does it go?
Yeah. I think in order to get the political momentum to change, you need to think about the next generation, because I am quite hopeful that, especially in North America, the next Gen Z generation and the younger ones are being raised by, you know, alternative media, like, you know, the PewDiePie 9-year-old generation who
as long as it's not Alex Jones.
Yeah. Yeah, who are not being raised in this kind of like virtuous kind of left-wing education standing that previous generations since the boomer generation endured. So I'm hoping that as they get older and they start to become the next working force generation, they'll start to change the political momentum in the West from the left to the right, hopefully.
Well, I have seen it, because my daughter, which I won't go on about anymore because there's been media around. Anyway, her mates, they're all very, 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 no, I'm not going to sleep about. I'm going to be very conservative. I'm going to wait. I want to meet a nice man. I want to plan a family. And they're going back, because my generation, unfortunately to say, we're the degenerate generation. They're the ones that went out and did whatever, spent money and got themselves into whatever. Not all of us, by the way. Just wait a
Oh, yeah.
You're going to edit that out, aren't you? Anyway, but basically, her generation are a lot more sensible now.
Oh, yeah.
I went against my father. He was sensible. I turned out to be the not sensible one, and my daughter is now the sensible one. That's what it always works out like. So that's the kind of hope I have. But also, if you open your eyes and you don't believe social media,
you
know, government-controlled social media, the BBC, all that sort of stuff, you can see what's happening in front of you.
Oh, yeah.
And if you can see what's happening in front of you, you know, you're going to think, well, whatever they're coming up with at the moment isn't working.
Yeah.
So let's go down a different road.
I agree. But I guess my only counter opinion about the optimism of Gen Z is that, unlike other previous generations, they're the first generation in time to be raised solely on technology, unlike other generations. Now, you might say that might be an advantage because they have a good perpendum of knowledge upbringing. But in my view, there are also some disadvantages, because that makes them a bit more reliant than other previous generations, because, like, in your day as a child,
go be a mechanic.
You know, you didn't have this kind of, like, you know, technology to kind of make you in a very dependent person when you were probably like in your young teens.
I played with a tree.
Yeah, but you had a more incentive to become more independent. Nowadays, financially, if you want a young person, especially a young man, to move out of his parents' house and to get his own apartment, it's not just the problem with economic, issues as well, but also conditionally there's a lot of like preserving of, in my view, like infantile.
Yeah, basic. Our generation, my generation, we went out, we did it, we had the fun, we didn't worry about all the, what if this happens, what if that happens, and we sort of manned up. That's not something allowed to say now. But this generation that stay in are not so manned up.
Yeah.
However, I think they're going to change. They'll have to change. If they don't change, they're knackered. Right, you can come back now. I think I've ruined your channel.
Yeah, sure. That's all right.
No worries, mate.
Thanks. Right. Thanks so much for taking over. Well, yes. I don't have that fear anymore. I might start using more copyrighted songs on the videos now, since it's not a problem, But yeah, so I was thinking about public shaming, right? And I really find this to be a really a strange phenomenon, because it's really like going back to a medieval mindset, putting people in gallows and stocks and chucking fruit at them and whatnot. And I'm thinking, it's just entirely coercive. I really don't like it. This kind of, imagine just having a group of people standing around you pointing and saying, you have to agree with us. You have to agree with us. That's the most awful thing I can imagine. If I think someone's doing something wrong, the last thing I do is just get them in front of a group of their friends and start yelling at them that, you've done something wrong. I'll approach that person on a one-on-one basis. I think that's the mature, respectful way to do things. Say, listen, I disagree with the things you're doing here. Have you considered X, Y, or Z, whatever it is? And and that just seems to be the sort of civilized way of doing this, in not trying to publicly ruin someone and trying to make it so their life is difficult. It's a way of, I think, actually getting them to correct their behavior, but instead of just coercing them into doing what you want. Because I don't think that at the end of any of these public shamings, anyone's learned any lessons. I don't think anyone's like, well, you know what, that was a good point. He made a very persuasive moral argument, and now I've decided that I was in the wrong. No, it's about a reign of terror. It's about fear. It's about making sure that every other person watching that pointing and going, yeah, you're the problem. Not you personally, obviously. You're the problem. It's about making sure they all understand that if it's not them pointing, it's them being pointed at. And nobody's going to want that, because it's a scary thing to have to go through. And so everyone's going to fall in line. It's like a kind of social dictatorship, and it's led by whichever charismatic dictator happens to get the ire of the mob on his side. And I think that's a really scary way to run a society. It's a really scary way that Westminster is run, and the media and the social media sort of atmosphere is genuinely honestly quite Stalinist. I just can't believe we've allowed to get it to this point, and it's really, I don't even know how we can undo it. How can you stop social media shaming? It's just natural, isn't it? When you've got like a closed environment like Twitter, and a few million people can see like whatever it is that's going around, the shameful thing you've done. How can you stop that? How can this be prevented? I don't even know if there's an option to get us out of this kind of hole. And I guess it takes like giant dicks like me to just stand up and say, what, I know I'm right and I know you're all wrong. I'm not afraid of that. Well, what's going on? Bye. That's the thing. I just don't care. I don't know who she is. I don't know what she thinks, and I don't care about her opinion. And so, but I know that I think that I'm doing the right thing. And if I thought I wasn't doing the right thing, I'd listen to someone who talked to me about it. And if I thought I was wrong, I'd change my mind. I'd actually take responsibility for the things I believe. I wouldn't just be cowed by a mob. It's just something that's been on my mind for ages. Like, well, what are the alternatives? How do we get out of this kind of mindset? And if anyone's got any ideas, I'm all ears, because honestly, I'm not even sure. Maybe. Sorry? Yeah, it's one of those things where I just haven't had enough time to go into depth about it. But I'll tell you what, have a microphone.
Use the Socratic method. Instead of trying to tell people what you think, or trying to argue against what they think, ask them questions about what they think. Very small things. Sow seeds of doubt within their ideology, that will spark a desire to start asking questions.
I think that's a great point, but the problem is you require a respectful dialogue to be able to do that. You could do that to me because I'm not going to shout you down, but when you're being shouted down, you've just got to stand there and take it, really, haven't you?
It is possible, though. As I was talking to you about my daughter earlier, she was very entrenched within this ideology and surrounded by people who were talking these points at her consistently. And I could see the path that she was travelling down, so I started to talk to her about it. Now, okay, there's a certain amount of bias there, but she was a teenager and she hated me at the time.
They all do.
Which is about right. But I asked her some questions. I can't even remember what they were at this point. But I asked her things about the things she was saying. And asked her, did she think it was right? Was she sure? And she started asking questions. And of course, the cognitive dissonance kicked in. But eventually she came out of the other side, and she said to me very recently that she feels like I saved her from that path.
And you probably did, from the sounds of it, because she was falling into the sort of mob mentality where I'm right because I'm being validated by a mob of people.
It's more prevalent for her because she's got Asperger's.
Right,
now she's high functioning, but that makes them very obsessive about certain subjects. And so it's very difficult for them to form their own opinion.
Yeah.
They hear an opinion and they adopt that opinion and then spread that opinion. So for her, it was a massive barrier to learning new information. And she complained that she was only regurgitating my opinions or her friends' opinions. She didn't know her own opinions at that point when I said to her she needed to think about these things. And now she has her own opinions.
See, that's
huge.
That's fantastic. But the thing that I'm worried about now is, like you say, she's a conservative person inherently, and she's going to go into very progressive spaces, and it's very likely, in my opinion, that something she said 3 years ago will be discovered on Twitter. She'll, oh my goodness, have you seen this? And then it'll be all of the group that's around her, and then they'll start pressuring her and shaming her. And I think that'd be terrible. And as you say, she's got Asperger's, so it's not like she's a.
It might be terrible for them because the thing about people with Asperger's is they have no verbal filter, and they say exactly what they think.
But that's the thing. So then the pressure, I think, will increase. People just like, oh my God, stop saying these things. You're wrong. We're all in agreement. You're wrong. Therefore, you must be wrong. And that's going to put her in a position that I think is a kind of terrible pressure, right?
But do you think that it can also have the opposite effect and start to make other people really experience the cognitive dissonance enough that they will start asking small questions?
I think it could, and by God, I hope it does, because that's the reason I'm kind of standing up against it. But I'm an old man who doesn't care. She's a young lady who might be in a vulnerable position. So I'm just trying to be considerate of the fact that I appreciate that my situation isn't necessarily the same as everyone else's, and it's all well and good for me because, like I say, I'm a dick, but I'm sure your daughter isn't a dick. I'm sure she's a lovely person. So.
I disagree with you.
Well, shame that lady. No. But that's the thing, isn't it? It's easy for us to talk about it because we've got like a relatively safe space to talk about it in, But I honestly think it can be scary when this kind of thing happens, and it is people like your daughter that I'm genuinely concerned about here, because there are going to be people who have different levels of mental health who are going to find themselves subject to this, and people on social media are cruel. It's having that level of separation between the individual. When you're talking face to face, very very few of the protesters are actually rude to me when I'm there face to face, unless they've got a large enough gang of them and they feel emboldened. But normally everyone's actually quite polite because you realise you're dealing with a human being. But on social media, you've got that level of distance that really does just allow people to unleash. And we see this all the time. There was a 14-year-old the other day that saw that people had like an Instagram poll or something to kill herself, and so she had killed herself. And I was thinking, man, if that's my kid in 10 years' time, I don't know what I'm going to do, and it's something that really worries me. And it's something that is really irresponsible about social media that no one predicted. And
perhaps then it's incumbent on the parents and on the social gathering, family members and communities around people to create strong, independent human beings
Yes.
from the off,
Yes.
and maybe take them out of school.
Yes, and well, I'm all for people who want to homeschool, of course. But you're absolutely right. Create strong, independent-minded human beings who can think for themselves and will understand why they stand for what they stand for. I think, but again, if you're in a really powerful culture of shaming, then it's difficult to be like that, you know. And I'm not going to pretend that everyone can just, you know, be like, oh yeah, I'm certain, because not everyone is. You know, it took me a lot of work to get to the point where I'm certain in what I believe, and I even understand that there's a difference between guilt and shame culture. It took me a long time to understand these things, and you know, people are like 16, 17. They're not going to understand it, and it's unreasonable to think that they should. So, I really wish that we could sort of like have these sort of dialogues, honestly, on the BBC and the press, you know, where they can actually address their own behaviour and their own culpability in being part of the public shaming mechanism, the sort of industry of it that's going around now. But it's profitable. It gets clicks. They're incentivized to do it. And so I don't think they're going to change. And I'm genuinely worried about what happens after that. But is there anyone else who'd like to talk to me about anything? Or would you just like me to have a waffle about something? Yeah, please. Yeah, sorry, I'm standing up because I can keep warmer. Really yeah, it's really chilly today. Yeah. Don't put the don't point the thing at the thing. Mic. Yeah.
It's great to see you here. I'm really glad. Though it is
Thank you.
freaking cold.
You've got to hold that a bit closer.
Yeah, it is really,
it is very
really
cold today. Yeah, which is weird because every other day we've done, even when it was raining, it was still hot.
Sea breeze.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I wasn't quite sure what to expect when I came down and sitting by the mob of baying people.
Oh, these were very tame.
Yeah,
very tame.
I think you might have a very different crowd tomorrow in Bournemouth.
Really? What are you expecting?
I don't know, but I think it might be a bit more spicy.
Oh, okay. I'm okay with that.
But something that they were going on about was the very high rates of child poverty in these kind of areas, the old seaside towns that have become very, very sort of neglected, where the old industries have gone, you know, obviously fishing. Obviously fishing, something that UKIP has championed bringing back, and I'm really for that because it's such an amazing industry for these places that have just gone.
Well, it doesn't make any bloody sense that an island doesn't fish in its own waters.
Yeah, I agree.
And the Spanish and the French do.
Yeah,
it's like, what is going on here? You know, it's just totally backwards.
And like you, I'm massive advocate of entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And places like here, well, what do they have? What do the young people have here that they can, you know, cultivate? And there's no industries for them here. Yeah. There's, you know, connections, road connections, rail connections, not great. It was sort of just, what could we do? I mean, obviously we can mentor people, we can try and encourage people, but is this something that you've thought about? I mean, obviously I'm a little bit off the cuff.
No.
And I know it's not your area of expertise, but it's just trying to bring this to your attention. This was something they were bringing up.
Yeah.
Can you think about that and start coming up with answers?
Well, honestly, I'm totally sympathetic to the need for us to do this, because anything that can get people to stop moving to London is a good thing. Because London it's an awful place in many regards. And one of the problems is the brain drain it creates on the rest of the country.
Yeah.
You know, people think, oh, I have to get out of the seaside resort town that I'm in because there's nothing here.
Yeah.
And I have to go somewhere else if I want to make fame and fortune and stuff like this. And I completely agree. It's something we have to think about. The fishing industries are obviously something that we have to revive in this country. It's ridiculous that we've allowed the European Union to destroy them as we have. But it was beyond our power. Once we were in the trap, as it were, it was sprung on us and we couldn't get out of it. And I think it is going to be something that will help revitalize the Southwest, particularly.
Yeah.
But when it comes to sort of like new industries, like tech industries, stuff like this, I don't know. I don't know what we can do about that. You know, I wish there were easy answers, but like I said, it's not my area of expertise. Yeah. So maybe there are answers that I'm just simply not aware of.
No, that's cool. Just was thinking about it and thought I'd bring it up. Something else that I was thinking about when we were talking about universities, that going to universities have been proselytized so much since sort of Blair came into power.
Yeah.
And certainly I was caught up in this, as you were.
That's why I went. I didn't really want to do what I did.
We're contemporaries, so...
Yeah, I just didn't know what else to do.
And, you know, my church is now meeting in a school, and all over the wall is all this newspeak, climbing the mountain to university. And
yeah.
I've been thinking about this a lot because I'm very much a somewhere, there's anywhere, somewhere dichotomy.
For anyone who's not aware, it wasn't Roger Scruton that coined it, but it was in his book Where We Are, talking about the culture of Britain. He distinguished between the cosmopolitan anywhere types, who the sort of people who feel comfortable in any city in the world, any major city in the world, or the somewheres, the people who've got deep roots in certain locations. So it's about the place and the people, it's home, And there's a very strong distinction there, and I'm guessing that a lot of you folks are the somewheres, and the people who are calling us names are the anywheres, But sorry, Karen.
And with all this encouraging people to university, that they strip out the young people from these kind of towns because they see it as their ticket out.
Yeah.
And then they go into their indoctrination camps, which are universities.
Universities,
these days.
yeah.
And then they don't go back, and it just strips more and more people out of these communities, and you end up with people that are adrift. People that have lost all their social collateral, all of their connections from the people they grew up with, all that trust is all gone, and they end up in a strange place all alone.
Yeah.
And it's trying to break that mold. I don't know whether it's something you thought about before.
Well, I have thought about it, but honestly, I'm not even sure what the answers are. We have to start building outside of London, building like entrepreneurs like ourselves. I mean, this is why I've not moved to London. I don't because I employ 3 people now. I don't want to employ them in London. I want to show that there are places outside of London that can be productive and can build, and we can start being independent of London. But I mean, honestly, I don't have the answers here. I wish I did.
No, it's great, and I'm hopeful if you do get your candidacy, we'll see, that this is something you'll be able to champion.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know
Absolutely.
that your ability to do anything in the European Parliament will be negligible, but at
It
least
will, yeah.
it gets the conversation going. And
Yes.
hopefully it can get people thinking and break people out of this mindset.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is why I'm doing it. And honestly, the fact that I'm standing in and of itself has been an amazing opportunity for me to be able to actually talk about a lot of these things that are otherwise things that nobody wants to think about, because it means that we really have to reevaluate how we see the world. It's not just all the glitz and glamour of London that is the good in life. There are good things outside of that, and then you have to start saying, well, what are we talking about here? And then we're talking about the regular British folk.
Yeah. In my opinion, the best things.
Well, I agree. These are actually the parts of life that actually have meaning and weight to them, and they're the things that you'll remember long after you forgot when you got drunk with Frank in a bar somewhere in London and got your wallet stolen or something. That'll be long gone, but you'll still have the connections in your local communities that you've fostered and cherished for a lifetime. And I mean, and the weird thing is, I'm one of the anywheres as well, right? I'm not, I'm a Forces brat, so like every 3 years would move to somewhere else, and so I got used to making friends very quickly, and it was one of those things that the roots you formed were never very deep. And one thing that I've been trying to do in my adult life is actually establish deeper roots with long-term relationships and long-term interests in a certain area, because I don't want to be just one of those people who can be anywhere. I think that's kind of a sad life.
And have you seen that in your family?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, that's why I moved to Swindon, because all my family are from Wootton Bassett and the southwest. I mean, I went to university in Coventry. I could have gone anywhere, but I wanted to be somewhere that that I had family around, and I've obviously got friends around here as well, and I would just prefer to be someone who cares about somewhere, because the people who are the anywheres, man, I don't know whether they think they're happy or not.
Well, also, how can someone be a politician for somewhere that they don't care about?
Well, yes, that's it. Yeah, I mean, I never intended to be a politician, but yeah. But that's a great point. They literally. I mean, I hate the way politics is done in this country, where they sit in London, go on the BBC or on Sky News, and just expect your vote.
Yeah.
They know that you're going to vote for them. Who are you going to vote for? Someone else? Don't be silly.
And they parachute people in for a safe seat.
Yes. Anne Widdecombe.
Yeah. Well,
why does she give a damn about the Southwest? She doesn't. She's 71 years old. She was in retirement. She's just doing this to stick it to the Tories who have become Labour light. That's the only reason she's doing it, and she's open about this.
New Labour.
Yes. I mean, she even said in a BBC interview the other day that even though she's standing for the Brexit Party, she's going to vote Tory. And it's like, what the hell are you doing, Anne? This is not a game, These are this is our country. This is where we live, We don't care about your political games in Westminster. It's not our problem, But yeah. So basically, we've got a long journey ahead of us, and very few people are really aware of the sort of things that are coming up.
They're all still asleep.
They are.
Yeah.
They are. They very much are. The previous paradigm still has a great hold over their imaginations. And, we'll just have to work one day at a time and see if we can change things little by little.
Yeah, little steps.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just rambling on for ages now. But, I mean, if anyone else would like to say anything, you don't have to come up. You can just take a microphone. Say anything that's on your mind. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, let's bring up the subject. About here. Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. About age of consent. Now,
Right, yeah.
I know. It's
Well,
all
I
right,
want
it's
to
been
raise it,
hashed
yeah.
out, but
Yeah.
I rather think maybe that it's not high enough.
Well, no,
Maybe
I
it needs to
agree.
go up to perhaps 19.
Yeah.
And I wonder if this is a feature of our development because we now have longer lifespans.
Yep.
And there's not the pressure to breed to avoid being extinct anymore.
Mhm.
So, yeah, of course, women face the issue of at 40 or thereabouts, they stop producing eggs. So that's going to be a downward pressure to make sure we don't end up with this trend going on forever.
Yeah.
But I wonder if it's going to be a feature of our species that we just end up with the juvenile stage extending a bit further, perhaps even into mid-20s.
Well, they already think that it is. I mean, universities are actually treating students like children.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah, it really is. It's treating them as if they are not actually adults when they go to university. And I went to university at 19, and I was treated like an adult while I was there, and I appreciated that for myself. I mean, for me, it was a way of escaping childhood, escaping the bonds of having to live with my parents, suddenly I'm my own man.
Yeah.
And that for me was very exciting, and I was very ready for that. But maybe I'm the exception, or maybe that was 20 years ago, and it's a different world now. It seems that young people today actually do want to continue to be infantilized and out of fear. And I think that the adults around them are the ones instilling this kind of mindset into them. Because if you're instilling a more sort of proactive mindset where you were the boss of your own life, then they wouldn't think that way, I don't think. I think they'd be eager to get out and they'd be eager to be adults in the real world. And
To make their own mark on the world.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I do wonder if it's going to be ingrained in our biology before long, because if we keep doing it as a society, it'll be selected for.
That's evolution, yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I don't think we should. And the thing is, it comes from a kind of mindset that thinks that indulging things is good. And on a very surface level, it might well seem that way. And every parent has done this with their kids, where the kids, the kid will be very happy if they buy them the toy, and they complain, and so you buy them the toy, and the kid's very happy for now.
Yeah.
And then tomorrow, they really want this new toy. And they're even, they start kicking up an even bigger fuss. So now you have to do it, because otherwise it's just going to be a massive tantrum meltdown. And so what you're doing is incentivizing bad behavior by what appears to be, at least initially, doing something nice. Because sometimes you have to look in the long view. And this is why I'm very concerned about sort of left-wing morality at the moment. The way it's set up is to just give everyone exactly what they want as soon as they want it, like immediate gratification. Oh, you're upset. Oh no, it's like, don't have any kind of internal dialogue with yourself. Don't be self-critical. Everyone else is the problem if you're upset. And I really am not sure that that's a very moral way to actually structure the world.
Not very healthy either.
Well, exactly. I think that is actually doing a disservice to these people in the long run. And sometimes having to overcome adversity is, always, that is where character comes from. You have to overcome adversity to grow as a person. And if everyone is always trying to prevent you from overcoming adversity, what they're effectively doing is kind of locking you into a pattern of thought that you can't really escape. And so everything around you becomes suddenly triggering and upsetting, and now you have to try and change the world around you rather than changing yourself. And that's a lot easier task, I would think, is to change the way you view things than the way everything actually is.
Yeah. Also, if the menopause doesn't also increase in age, the stage that occurs. Not everyone's the same. It's not always 40. It varies.
And with
it will
fertilization treatments, it can go higher as well.
True. It will compress the age range in which women can plan a family or have a family.
Yeah, that's true.
So
Well, no, that's a concern as well, because there is an epidemic of women who are reaching their mid-30s now who can't find a man. And you see this all the time. It's in the sort of the female sections of newspapers where every day you'll see an article. I'm 40 years old. I've got a high flying career, but I can't find a man to marry me. And it's like, well, why not? And it's because genuinely you've committed yourself to being a careerist. You haven't taken the steps necessary to form a bond with someone in the long term, to plan a family and to actually raise a family. You've skipped all of this and said, well, I can do that later. Well, you can't. Nature isn't very kind. There are certain biological realities that you can't just escape because you think that you want that.
Yeah, unfortunately, nature will not bend to their will in this case.
Absolutely, and part of human nature is the fact that men are attracted to youthful women. And so, you can say, well, that's sexist. That's this. That's that. It's like it's also true. Yeah. It's also one of those things where it's like, look, ladies, don't leave it until you're almost 40 to think about starting a family, because you're gonna be hard pressed to find a guy who wants to take that on. So it's cruel reality. I'm not saying I approve. I'm just saying that this is the way it is.
Well, that's it. You have to adapt to the reality with which you are presented.
I think so.
Alrighty. Well,
cheers, man.
Anyone else? And you.
Cheers. Yeah, go ahead, man. Which other event did you come to?
I went to Gloucestershire.
Yeah, that was
I did that one, yeah.
Yeah, I knew it. I'm always good with faces.
Yeah, that's fine. Right. Is this on? Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
that's on.
Right. I want to ask you a question. Do you believe that with the left versus right pendulum, you often think that it's... do you think that they kind of philosophize the kind of two-gender paradigm, where the left kind of represents the feminine kind of point of view, and the right often, represents the kind of masculine point of view? Do you believe in that kind of philosophy? Because there is an interesting dialect to that with the new social justice far left. A lot of, if you really think hard of the certain words that they use, you can almost situate it that it's coming from mostly Americanized feminine women.
Yep.
From their kind of feminist point of views. And usually like the men who are in that left-wing area kind of have this... well, if you go to any like left-wing protest, there tends to be like a massive kind of majority of women of all ages, all of that. And you kind of think in the back of your head, are these guys only just there because they actually believe in it, or are they trying to seem virtuous because they want to attract them as a mate or something like that?
Honestly, I'm not the guy to answer this question, but it's easy to frame these things in that way, and especially if you take the kind of guilt-shame moral dichotomy. Women tend to be more social than men. They're more concerned about the opinions of the people around them. And I think you see this with this sort of like the mean girl syndrome in schools. Yeah. Where you've got like a gaggle of women, young girls sat on a table who ostracize another one through shame. And I was always part of the group of like nerdy guys who they'd come over and we'd let them play Dungeons and Dragons with us or whatever. They'd come and play with us because we weren't going to just shame them for whatever reason it was. But you'd always see like this. Shaming mechanisms do tend to be found in groups of women. Yeah. And I mean, you could argue that it's something to do with the feminization of society.
Yeah, like, especially with universities. Like, my opinion with universities, that I believe that, I think it's a real shame. I don't know when this happened, what date this happened, but there was a shift when universities were institutions and they became commercialized businesses. Yeah. And I don't know when that happened or why that happened. But I honestly think that it's kind of like downgraded the kind of like, standards of universities to the point that, if I was like born in the 50s, I would have to be not only have the kind of right academics, but also have to be a particular certain class in order to get into high places like Oxford. But now anybody like from any single background, whether they are legal system or not, can actually get a place there now. And it's quite...
I think that the opportunity should be there, but I think that the way the culture of the institutions have changed is the problem. Yeah. Not necessarily that anyone's available.
Okay.
We see in like some of the sort of like older elite ones that the culture's still very much the same.
Oh yeah.
So that actually hasn't changed. But yeah, I mean, but the thing is, I'm very wary about just defining left as being womanly and right as being masculine.
Okay.
I'm very cautious about that kind of thing because I think it can lead us into like lazy thinking.
Yeah, and then the opposition could use that.
Well, I'm not worried about what the opposition. I'm worried that it leads us into a sort of just a lazy way of viewing the world and suggesting that one thing is good and the other thing is bad. And I don't think that's true. I think that it's ridiculously complicated, obviously. But I don't think it's wise if we start adopting that kind of framework because I think then that'll lead us into inaccurate characterizations.
Yeah.
And I think that the most important thing is the accuracy of our characterizations because that's how we understand the world. And I mean, one of the things that I always get with people is like they always want to overestimate the opposition because they think that then that puts more impetus on them to work harder or something like that. And I say, well, I mean, if you do that, you're just misinforming yourself. So you might be doing things that aren't necessary or might not even be reflective of what the opposition really represents. In any walk of life, in anything that you're doing, you should try and characterize things as accurately as you're able to do. I think,
I mean, like, well, yeah, you got me on that point, but it's just that, like, I just want people to be aware that, like, all of this, far left. I know the far left has always existed, throughout the 20th century, but the point that they've kind of, entered this century, they haven't, in my view, properly cropped up since back into the Gamergate days back in 2013 when all of this, started to, with Trump and the Brexit, that only turned on the heat, basically.
Yeah.
But the way I analyze kind of social justice and far left kind of talking points is that, a lot of what they say has that kind of moral concern, which is a very much a self-virtue kind of point, which you see very much in feminized, social groups. Because I've understand that in female psychology, that the reason why, when you listen to a group of women speaking, they all tend to have this kind of very creepy, not creepy, but this is me coming from a man's point of view. They all tend to feel that they are terrified of offending each other, so that's why they all say, "Oh, yes, I agree on this." And they look on everyone around.
One of our lady audience members is disagreeing. Can I pass the mic to her and get her opinion? Would you like to? Because I'd like a female perspective on this, if you please.
I know.
Yeah, she's good.
Only just to say that that's only true in certain groups. There are certain groups of females who get together to talk about babies or makeup and boyfriends and things like that. Superficial, shallow conversations. In those friendship groups, you do tend to find that behaviour. But in closer knit girl groups where they've been friends for a very long time, they're much closer. It's really not very much different than the interactions that men who've been close for a very long time.
Is it about the size of the group? Because I've noticed something's very similar to what you're describing, but when the and I would call this a very positive thing, a very supportive, nurturing atmosphere that I think is very good. But I've always noticed it happens amongst a much smaller group of friends, and the phenomenon I think we're talking about is when it's a much larger group of people. Do you think that's accurate?
I think it has more to do with the location than it does to do with the group itself. If it's a large group who's not particularly well known to each other, there's new people in the group, or it's very much about playing up to each other and pantomime and showing what you want them to see as opposed to who you really are. And that's very much something that guys do as well. It's not just girls that do that.
I agree. They definitely do, but I think they do it in a different way, don't they?
For sure.
Yeah,
it's bitchier.
Well, yeah, no. Well, no. I agree that it might look that way, but there's the old sort of like cartoon where you get the group of women who come together and then they say all these lovely things to each other and they walk and go, "Oh, she was a bitch," and then it's the other way for guys. I'll go up to him and go, "Oh, you look like a dick," and then when he walks off, I'm like, "Hey, he's a good guy," and it's the kind of reverse, and I find that very interesting dynamic. That's I mean, I can't necessarily explain it.
Guys will rough and tumble with each other.
Yes.
Girls will be bitches to each other. Guys will do it in a physical sense because they're physical beings.
Yeah.
Girls would tend to do it in a verbal and snidey way. It's a dominance battle, but it is a specifically female dominance battle or a masculine dominance battle. There really isn't any difference other than the way it's portrayed, and it will always seem that way to people who are outside the group looking in, because they're not part of the group, but they are present, and because they're present, the group will play up to whatever is in the vicinity. If it's a large group of women and they're just in one place and it's just them, it's not like that at all.
Right, okay.
Not very often.
See, it's difficult for me to know, because I think that these sort of when you have like a monogender group, when you introduce someone of another gender into the group, the dynamic changes completely. Yes. So I don't get to see this as a man, and you go as a woman get to see how men interact.
Yeah.
But
it's like the age-old question that guys ask: why do girls go to the toilet together?
Well, yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah, it's because we like to bitch about the men.
Honestly, that's why men like to go down the pub together, so they can bitch about their wives.
Exactly. We're really not that different.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Okay, I disagree on the location aspect, but I do agree with what you just said about it's about dominance and all of that, because usually if you get you get a room of 7 men and they're having a conversation about whatever, and then you bring in an attractive female in, or just like a sound effect.
No, he's so right. It's the most insufferable thing in
all,
the world.
All the attention goes onto her, because then you're going into this evolutionary mammalian aspect where all the men are kind of like, they're all talking to the girl, but the reason why they're not talking to each other, because that unity is broken, is because it's that kind of it's
competition.
Yeah, competition. Yeah, and like you can, if you try to really think deep about that natural mammalian instinct, you can apply that into almost every form of life, especially in politics. And the way that I see the current modern political left of how it's changed is that a lot of its talking points, its narrative, have been dominated by far left women, in my view. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me that if Corbyn somehow isn't successful with his political campaign, say like if he eventually doesn't pass the post, it might be a very worse kind of far left woman that might be the equivalent of Cortez in the States, or Hillary Clinton, or
Angela Merkel,
or Jess
Phillips.
Yeah, because generally, if you analyze the kind of behavior of far left men, they're very when a woman is speaking over them, they don't have the urge to talk in front of her. They are very much more reluctant to back down, not because that they believe that she's right. It's because that, oh shit, I have to be put in my place.
It's about
now.
authority, isn't it? And because I've noticed that someone like Jess Phillips, right? I've known a lot of women like Jess Phillips, and see, you know exactly where I'm coming from here. She's a matriarch. She's the boss of her household, I would say. Yeah. But that's the thing, and that's a form of strong woman, completely, and that's. Honestly, and I think that's why my joke or my comment 4 years later is still being brought up, because that was what I was challenging, is the matriarchy that she's trying to put out. And I know it's a strange thing to think about, but there are a lot of women in my family who are like this, and obviously I love them dearly, but just growing up, I got very used to this kind of dominant female personality. Not good or bad, just is. But it was one of those things where you could see that she was exercising this over Philip Davies, and in what I think is a really inappropriate way. And what the thing that really pissed me off, though, is after she had blocked this thing, she was standing with Philip Davies, like that. You probably saw the video, and she's there dancing around as if she's the cat that got the cream.
Yeah.
I couldn't stand it. And she's talking over him and laughing in his face, and I'm just like,
yeah,
that's cruel, Jess. You're openly exercising this power over him. You're blocking something that's a legitimate issue, and then you're crowing over afterwards. And I was like, oh, that's so awful.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Especially over the severity of the issue.
I've got an example from my family where I have this godmother who I do love personally, but she in her household she's wife to a husband who's quite, I'd say, a bit more passive than her, and I do often quite feel sorry for him, because he often has to she often becomes the bare household manager of the house, and it's just, God, I keep saying to this guy, you need to really, get your, momentum back, because you're just allowing her to dictate what your daughters are doing, what they're going to do, and you're having zero input. And she's the main, earner and provider, and that's kind of given her the incentive to be the disciple maker. I've encountered those types of women myself. But the worst thing is when you actually challenge them, they kind of break away the kind of immaturity, and they kind of act like that they're like the school teacher.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They try to speak to you like, "Oh, I'm more mature than you. You're being a naughty boy. I'm going to lecture you." And it's
condescending.
It's that really insidious behavior that I'm finding very apparent.
Well,
in
this is interesting actually, because one of the things that Jordan Peterson always talk about is like male archetypes and how the male archetype can become tyrannical.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I think it's very difficult to address is when the female archetype becomes tyrannical in its own way. And I think that Jess Phillips, I love how much you're nodding about this, because I'm glad that someone else thinks the same, because I do view her as tyrannical. I view her as very aggressive and very domineering, and unnecessarily so. Deliberately so. Exactly. Yeah. No. Well, do you want to pass it back?
Yeah.
Well, no, I want this all on record. That there's a woman who agrees with me.
She's not offended. She doesn't need to be offended. She's using it as leverage. To further her political career. And she's using it to keep herself relevant. She's using it to appeal to her fan base, feminists of a particular stripe.
Beta
Not
males.
all feminists. Yeah, for sure. But probably she's also using it as deflection from things like her expenses scandal of with taking about £212,000 worth of expenses over the last year.
And the Cologne New Year's Eve comments, comparing that to a night in Birmingham.
And knifing Jeremy Corbyn and things like that. But to be honest, those are words.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not
That's
fussed
nothing,
about words. I'm never fussed about words. Say what you like, as long as you're not actually inciting. Exactly.
Correct, sir.
As long as you're not inciting violence, as long as you're not doing it with the intent to cause really serious harm to someone, because we know that you can be really cruel.
Yes.
I don't have a problem with words.
Yeah.
Not from anybody. Not any words.
Yeah.
Because it's absolutely context and intent that those words have. And she is not offended. Not by any stretch of the imagination. She reminds me of school bullies. The girls that I was bullied by at school, I recognise them the second I see them. The way she talks to people, the way she condescends to people, the way she acts superior.
Yep.
I think that she has massive insecurities. She's not as strong as she thinks that she is. She's not the bitch that she thinks she is. And she's never met a bitch like me.
Yeah, here.
Right, I tell you, I'm sorry to say this, but we're actually going to have to pack up fairly soon, because we've got to be in Bristol for the hustings. But I mean, it's freezing cold, so I'd like to. Man, I don't know how you're doing it in shorts, man. I honestly, my hands are freezing. Yeah, no, dude, you're doing a great job of surviving this. But yeah, so thank you everyone for turning out. Really
Pleasure
appreciate
speaking
it.
to you.
Thank you. Well, mate, I'm doing my best. But no, thanks everyone for turning up. I really appreciate it, and on such a gloomy day. But yeah, so we'll get this uploaded as soon as we can. So, and I'll probably take that clip out and I'll get in. Good. Now that's what I like to hear. That's what confidence is to me. Someone who stands by what they say. Good. Sorry? Well, yeah, exactly. So yeah. So thank you everyone, and we'll pack up.